Hi and welcome to my channel. Here I'd like to show how to make an EDM track. In this case it's a drone-based track which I haven't finished, frankly speaking. I'm doing it in Ableton Live, as you can see, and this Ableton Live version is intro version of the 11th in series. So that means that I have only 16 tracks per project. As you can see here, I only use 13, and I can say that 16 is a lot amount of track to be done. You can actually squeeze in everything in 16 tracks. Sometimes I use some tricks. For example, I use some separate tracks to squeeze in a few synth lines or percussion lines if they share the same EQing. It's not a problem for me, but I know that in the beginning I was and someone else would be doing a lot of tracks to squeeze in, and that's normal. So you can stick to different doors, not only this one. So that's my problem, that I have intro version of Ableton. You may have any other door of your liking. What I'm showing now is actually the structure of a D&B track in this case, and of course it's a kind of my own meaning. It's not an absolute truth for sure, but here, based on some of my experience of a few decades, I would like to show how you can actually manage your track to make it more or less good, and at least it could be a good push for you to develop further with your techniques, with your style, and so on. So, just to be short, here I'm showing what kind of arrangement I have. I have just something very, very basic, and something maybe very important, the most important parts without which you wouldn't be able to use it. So in order to simplify music production for me, I use Moog Subsequent 25. In my case, you can use any other external instrument to your liking, which suits perfectly to your style, and so on. I use external instrument just to save my CPU and just to somehow be more tricky with the use of limited amount of tracks in my case, to squeeze in a few synth lines in one track, for instance, if I'm running out of those projects, of those tracks. So here I start just with some intro for a couple of patterns. Here we have some percussion, which I use with simple EQing, which is quite the same for almost all of them. I just take off lows, and the same for another breakbeat loop, almost the same, just taking off lows and adding some mids and highs and putting up the output. You can hear it like this. So here I also use it in combination with the pad, which is the only instrument, I guess, from the sample library of Ableton, which I widely use and widely recommend because it's quite fine for beginners, for sure. So here I use it for pad, synthetic strings it's called. Well, some manipulations with the adjustments here, and also just putting out the lows, adding some mids and highs, adding compression. It's the pad I'm talking about, to make the sidechain with the breakbeat loop, which is also taken from the sample library of Ableton. You would hear it further in the drop, and adding, of course, some super massive, which is a reverb or delay, whatever to your liking. And gradually adding some bass lines, synths, and so on and so forth. And just after a couple of patterns, 8 patterns, I make a drop. So here I use the bass line, which is very, very distinctive, wall shaking and ground shaking, which is Moog is popular for. Here it is, really plain one. Then I add the drop after the 8th pattern or so. The drop here consists of just the bass line and the main drum and bass loop. And then I gradually add some vocals. Now, vocals are been mixed with the reverb or delay. on vocals, I use delay or reverb, or also EQing without the lows, and of course doing the panning effect to make it sound more stereo, make it sound more interesting. And of course, slicing it up, I'm using here a sample from Ableton sample library, which is also fine if you make it really distinct, really original. So here I try to do this by changing some of the pitch somewhere, slicing it up like this, adding some panning and some additional effects. So after this part with the main drop, I come to the second breakdown. Not here. Here I've got the main theme playing, which is followed by this breakdown, which consists of the same synth, but here, as you can see, the pad is slightly different, with slightly different notes on it, just to make it sound a bit various, a bit different from what you hear here. Right, and using this part as a breakdown, I'm not putting it with the bassline effect, just plain drum and bass loop and most of the synths. This track is then finished, so I will not show you the outro. So it's just basically the same theme, the same section, which you can see here, coming from the first drop, is not just copy-pasted to this section, but well, it's copied with slight differences, which you can hear further when I finish up the track. So, which I strongly advise is to make various those parts, those sections in between the end of the previous pattern and the beginning of the next one, so that they wouldn't sound alike. And of course, adding some more interesting and various percussion would be my advice as well. Making slight different the main drum and bass loop is also good advice from me. However, it's quite simple. Here you can see just a few kicks in, snares and hi-hats. You can add some more, and in my case I add just whole loops from the sample library of Ableton. So you can just play with it for many hours, many days, as much as you like. Take your time, and the better result you get, the better outcome will follow, and you will see it for sure. So just for the beginning, as I said, it's good to have reference track, but not to just simply copy it, but to copy it with some variety, with some distinctive character of your own, which you can do, for example, adding some style in vocals and synths and playing and chopping and so on and so forth. You can play with just synth sound or chopping the ready-made samples, which wouldn't sound like they are in the original, which is good to my mind, because if you have your own feature in the track, it's always admirable to yourself. And of course, if it goes along with the standards which are in each style, for this case you should make the track in line with the reference track, and adding your own features would be just a great mixture, which would make a great track in the end. So simply put, just follow those simple advice. If you have some questions, I'm sure I haven't covered everything in my small overview. Just ask and I will answer your questions. And I'm planning some next videos with other EDM featured tracks of my own, which are finished or not, and I will just explain some tricks I did on them to make them sound more interesting, different, and kind of catchy within the style. So thanks for watching, and please share some knowledge, ask some questions, and we'll see you around soon.